So what is the PCF and how is it used? I'm going to explain this by kind of looking at the problem we're trying to solve, so we kind of get the background of what I'm talking about. So we all know that substantial investment has gone on into the data health system in the last, I'll say over the last decade. So we're looking at more data, more knowledge, more information than ever before. And what we expect is logically, a national TB program will be able to use that information to then inform their policies, the funding allocations, and their priorities. And at the end of the day, we then get a healthier population where we are able to control TB and eliminate it at the end of the day. However, what we expect is not what happens. Because what happens is the NCP is not particularly using, when I say the NCP, the National TB Program for short. The NCP is not actually using that data. They're not synthesizing that data effectively. And that does not adequately inform the policies, priority interventions, allocations. And we are now not on track to meet the universal TB target of elimination of TB by 2030. I do not believe any country is on track to meet that target. So it's a major issue that we're facing right now. What's the solution? WHO in 2019, along with some other global partners, came up with an approach to kind of fix the problem, at least start trying to fix the problem. And we started looking at what we call a people-centered framework. A people-centered framework is basically a framework that the TB program can use to do their program planning and prioritization to attack the biggest problems that they're experiencing and then solve the issues in a little bit-by-bit process. The second solution was a compendium of data evidence, and this is really where we tie in the PCF data work that we're doing, because they wanted a compendium of data, and then we thought, where would that repository be? How will people access that data? How can they efficiently use that data? And so the PCF dashboard was born out of that compendium. Now that we understand what the PCF is, we can now take a look at the concept of the data analytics tool and how we got here. As I already said at the start of the presentation, data is not a problem. There is an overwhelming amount of data existing. Where the problem is the use or the efficient use of that data for informed decision making. And we can see that the utilization of data analysis is a little bit small, apologies for that. But I see that the utilization of data in the TB hemisphere is largely split into what we call the TB patient pathway. TB patient pathway, just to break it down, is really what happens to a TB patient on their journey of trying to get cured from TB. So what happens to them before they enter the health system? What happens to them when they do get into the health system? They are not diagnosed or they are not notified. What happens to them when they are diagnosed and notified and they still do not get successfully treated, exit the health system and get back into the health system, and that whole vicious cycle just continues. That's what we call the TB patient's journey. And so we try to stratify data along this 3 cadre, and then the TB program is able to look at the data in different ways. So the first thing they want to look at is really what are the biggest challenges we're facing along these 3 stratifications of data that we have. And then doing a root cause analysis, they want to then understand what are the biggest issues causing these problems to happen. And then looking at the interventions that we have rolled out in the past, what are the most effective interventions to attack all of these issues that we've identified? And then the next step is looking at what we really have available in terms of funding. I think like the last speaker from Liberia said, it's a finite amount of resources. Health systems, if we're looking at health systems programs, I think HIV is kind of like at the top of the stratosphere, and then TB is kind of like at the bottom. So by the time they finish allocating funds from HIV all the way down, TB is getting the scrap. So we really want to understand what do we have available, and then what can we do with that little funding that we have available to be able to address the biggest challenges and then make an impact. That is really what this whole TB prioritization of data is all about, and that's what the PCF dashboard is trying to address. So to do this, the first thing we decided to do was to define a key set of indicators. Again, like you rightly said, countries are all about collecting indicators. It's almost like a performance management system on how many indicators you can actually routinely collect. We have global organizations, WHO inclusive, I'm sure they're here, pushing for so much data in terms of country performance. So we're trying to shift away from performance of a country to country accountability for themselves. And so we're able to identify a key set of priority indicators for countries to determine how they look at data across different strata of the system. And we started looking at different types of data, like epidemiology data. And this is really important, especially when it comes to TB, because of the epidemiology of TB disease. It's a very complicated disease. If I go into it now, we'll take the whole day trying to explain all of that. But you really want to understand from your data what the epidemiology of your TB is in your country, your health system data, and your people data. And what we realized was there was a whole lot of information on epi data. Countries could tell you how the epidemiology of the TB disease was in the country. But when you started looking at health systems data and people-related data, there was a huge gap there. So we're able to define priority indicators along these areas, and then stratify these indicators along the patient journey as I described before. The next step we did was to then collate that set of priority indicators into an Excel spreadsheet. And then we linked it to a Tableau dashboard. And then we shared this with countries. Off the back, this was, I would say, 20% successful. Countries really liked the idea that they had that priority set of indicators. They liked the idea that they could collect that information and routinely look at it, but then we ran into some problems. Some of the problems we experienced, like anybody can think of when you start thinking of using an Excel spreadsheet to collect large sets of data, is things around version control and corrupt data sheets. Again, when we started trying to get on more users into the analytics part of the platform, which was Tableau, it was not cost effective. Because it was a licensed platform, you had to pay per user. It really started getting complicated as we tried to scale up. Additionally, feedback from countries was, we want something we can own, something we can control, and something we understand. And so what we did was we listened to them, and we decided to do it on the HIS2. And that's where I went into Antoine, who I'll call at some point to answer some questions, I'm sure. And the decision to build it on the HIS2, as you can see, checked all the boxes to address a lot of the problems we were already experiencing. It was an all-in-one open source tool. Countries were familiar with this. I didn't have to explain to the country what the HIS2 was. It allowed custom visualizations. Again, countries were really happy that it was something they could own and they could control. And I remember when we started, I had this conversation with Anson, and he kept saying, oh, we need to build the KNCD server. And I kept saying, we don't want to own country data. We want to build it and give it to countries to do with it as they wish. So that's the whole idea, country accountability and country use. At the end of the day, we came up with this final solution, which is pretty much an installable file that can be implemented and customized within a country's existing HIS2 system. It allows custom categorized forms for data entry and intuitive dashboard visuals. It allows you to see data trends up to the last 5 years, and this is just how we've set it up, because typically for a TB program, we want to be looking at data trends for the last 5 years. However, this is customizable to look at trends over whatever period of time you choose. I'm going to just jump a little bit into what it looks like, what we've actually designed and built and developed for countries. And we have 3 major data sets. And if I'm talking to a HIS2 audience here, I think everybody knows what a data set is. Pretty much a group of indicators or data elements that we put into a category and call it a data sets. So we have 3 data sets. And what you'll see here is the example of the different data sets that we have. As I already mentioned before, our data is typically stratified into epi data, people data, and systems data. It's very simple, visually appealing data entry form that countries can enter data into. It also allows custom disaggregation levels, and you will see typical disaggregation levels like the age, demographics, gender, all of that bits. But again, what I find really interesting is it allows you to do some more custom-specific data disaggregation. For example, when you start talking about barriers to care, it differs per country, and what a country considers to be a challenge may not be a challenge in another country. So it allows you to do some specific customizations that are important for your country. We also have 4 customizable dashboards. And the first dashboard is really what we call a TB profile. And at a glance, looking at that dashboard, it lets you know where you are in terms of your TB control strategy in your country. And then the other 3 dashboards, we pretty much build them around the TB patient journey. So each dashboard lets the country know at a glance how well they are doing or how badly they are doing, based on patients who are not accessing their healthcare, patients who are actually getting and are not being attended to, and patients who are attended to but then not getting successfully treated. So all of this we put into different dashboards. Now I'll talk a little bit about, did I skip? No. Now I'll talk a little bit about how we are working with Zambia to adapt this for their system. So in Zambia, what had happened in Zambia was this started off from the COVID-19 pandemic, and it had a detrimental impact on most countries. And for Zambia, what I know was there was a large shift from their resources. Again, because just the context of COVID and TB is really so close. It's all respiratory lung diseases, so it's really so close. So a lot of the resources were shifted from TB to manage the COVID pandemic. And what they found out was there was a large decline, a very steep decline in their case notifications, TB case notifications. And so they came up with the idea to set up what they call a TB control situation room. The idea was they wanted to collect data on a more frequent basis. So I think they were collecting data monthly or quarterly, but they started doing it on a weekly basis. And then they started looking into that data to understand what the challenges were and how they could quickly address those challenges so that it didn't kind of roll over and impact the larger program. So it started with them actually collecting their data again on summarized spreadsheets, and then they put it into pivot tables. And then every week they would sit down with everybody from their district level, I think a representative from the district level, all the way up to the national level on a Zoom call. It was really interesting to see. I was able to participate on one of those meetings. It was about 70 people on one Zoom call, and then every district will then present their data and tell you if they were doing really badly, kind of like what their challenges were. And then the head of the national TB program was on that call and had to commit to changes to ensure that those problems were solved. So from a process perspective, which is what we were talking about, people, process, technology, from a process perspective, we got it right. However, technology was very limiting for them. As we know with Excel sheets, different things happen when different people are working on one version of an Excel sheet, and they started getting a lot of issues with the data compilation. And so that is where we came in KNCB. And we started working with them to design. We already had the PCF dashboard as a concept. And so we were like, what if we take this data that you already have and put it into this PCF data concept, and we set it up as a metadata package for you, and you take that and install it into your DHIS2, and you start using it for your surveillance system. And they were like, we're good, let's go ahead. And so we started working with them on it. And so we took those Excel spreadsheets and translated it into, it was 10 priority indicators they had, one data set, pretty simple setup. And then we took all those visuals they had come up with and we set it up into really nice dashboards. I think what they really liked about it was the fact they could now do some more mapping. There was now better disaggregation levels to see where districts were having really poor performance and be able to identify those districts. So we're able to do this with the PCF data package. And this slide just shows what they started seeing in terms of data trends before and after the implementation of the TB situation rule. There was, like I said before, the case notification numbers were decreasing. They set up the room and you can see a progressive increase of case notifications, because then they had the data to address the problems, and they were addressing the problems as they found them. So in summary, the PCF DHIS2 analytics tool is freely available to countries. It's not a replacement of a country's surveillance system. We're not trying to replace what we have. We're trying to optimize what you have. So the idea is to take it and plug it into what you already have and optimize your system. It can be adapted, it can be installed within a country's system within 2 to 3 weeks, and this largely depends on the DHIS2 expertise in country. There's also some funding available for it through the Global Fund Strategic Initiatives, which we're supporting some countries to tap into. And KNCD is available to provide minimal support where required. I think also in line with the whole DHIS2 capacity building, knowledge system, all of that, we're also working with BAO to build out a self-paced online learning system where countries can go online and understand how to install the package and to use the package. I think just to talk a little bit about capacity building, because I think came up in the previous presentation, is we really are trying to shift away from that, like you rightly said, finish a project, do a 2-day capacity building, hand over, run away. So what we're trying to do is we're really working with the countries to do the work themselves. For example, in Rwanda, what we've done is they've taken the package and they have installed it themselves and they have failed. And that's the thing, they know they have failed and we've been able to show them this is where you failed, these are the corrections you need to do, and they have gone back and they have done it successfully. So it's really getting them hands-on, getting them to use it on their own, and then be course correct where it's needed. So it's really a system that a country can own, a country can install, a country can manage, and a country can use all by themselves.